Hey everyone, this is D, Movieman, fellow cinephile, popcorn addict, and emerging film critic, coming to you with reliable recaps, reviews, and reactions. And today I'm coming to you all with a review for 1001, written and directed by Aven Rockwell, and starring Teyana Taylor, Will Catlett, Josiah Cross, Aven Courtney, and Aaron Kingsley Adetola. Story-wise, the film is centered around a young woman named Inez, who finds herself struggling to rebuild her life after being released from prison. She also seeks to reconnect with her son Terry, who is torn between the foster care system he's been placed into and the mother who has now re-entered his life. So, I'm going to start with the pros. Now, this one was a huge surprise for me, and I absolutely did not see it coming. So, this film had its world premiere at the 2023 Sundance Film Festival back in January, and it won the Grand Jury Prize in the U.S. Dramatic Competition. Now, this is my third year having the Sundance experience, and I must say it can be very overwhelming looking at the schedule, looking at all the films that are available, and deciding what to watch and what not to watch. Because I am telling you, if I were to buy a ticket for every single film that piqued my interest, like that bank account would be looking mighty interesting. But ultimately, I recognized that this is a film I absolutely needed to watch, so I got my ticket and I was able to watch it back in January, and man, there's so much to say. But for starters, as I mentioned, this is the creative work of Aven Rockwell, who is officially making her feature directorial debut with this film. She's previously directed various short films, including The Gospel and Feathers. She's also directed an episode of the series Boomerang. And additionally, she is a producer, writer, and cinematographer. Now, she was born in Queens, New York, and this film serves as a reflection of her love and her other conflicted emotions towards New York City as her home, and making sense of its evolution over the years to the benefit of some and the detriment of others. A core theme of the story here is gentrification. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's the process through which the character of a poor urban area is changed by wealthier people moving in, improving housing and attracting new businesses at the expense of current residences and businesses. I think when I was younger, the concept of gentrification, because I obviously didn't know the phrase or the name of the term, to me it seemed positive. It's like, we're cleaning everything up and we're, making everything thrive, businesses, and, like in theory, it's something that you would deem to be pretty positive. But then once I got older, I understood the whole displacement piece and the erasure of these communities and these subcultures and these communities that have been around for like so many years. And then all of a sudden somebody comes along and basically says, yeah, we kind of need you to go. But it's kind of said without being said, or certain things happen in order to force people out. And once you realize that, it's like, oh. But in contrast to that, I must say that I love seeing the replication of Harlem, New York in the 90s, looking at the payphones, seeing the hairstyles, hearing the music, and just bringing that back. I even remember how, even though I didn't grow up listening to rap necessarily, I do remember the Notorious B.I.G. being the first artist that I heard referencing their home and just kind of showing love and showing reverence and appreciation. Him being from Brooklyn and, the hustle and the grind and just the struggle and everything that shaped him and molded him into becoming who he was. Hearing someone actually speak about their home that way, it was really, really significant. And it also changed my perception of what rap was. You have an idea of it, but just the storytelling, I really recognized that at a young age. And of course, watching this made me think of my own hometown and what that was like. And you guys know that when it comes to my reviews and my commentary, it always gets personal for me on some level. And I just thought about what it was like to grow up in Gary, Indiana. Now, it's funny because when you say Gary, Indiana, the response is either, oh my gosh, the Jackson Five, the Jackson family, Michael, Janet. Or you'll hear Gary, Indiana. Oh, you know? And it's just par for the course. And there's a very small little group of people in between who have lived there who see it a little bit differently and have a more layered perception of it. My hometown started off in a very positive, thriving, metropolitan way. And that came as a result of the steel mills and the steel industry. When that industry went into decline, it had devastating consequences for the city itself. And you can imagine what happens as a result of that. And it is the most painful thing to experience because I have an entire treasure chest of memories that are attached to Gary because that is my home, that is my hometown, and it always will be. But no one will ever understand what was so special about it. No one will ever understand the people and the faces and the places that existed there and never will again. It's very difficult to grow up in a thriving community like that and then get older and just see it become a graveyard of sorts. And to have so much love for a place like that, but to see none of the love you felt be reflected in what it looks like today. So I connected to the idea of displacement, that conflicted emotion where it's like you have love for this. This is where you're from, like the memories, the love, the appreciation, the reverence, the respect, but no one else can step into your shoes and see it as it was. No one can feel the things that you felt. So I felt all of that watching, and I think that was the aspect of the story that struck the biggest chord with me. And I could really feel A.V. Rockwell's emotion because even with the Q&A, you know, she got very emotional because it's like, man, like how do you make sense of having love for a place that doesn't love you back? She said that. Yeah, and I really appreciated the rawness of that and the honesty of that. And it was absolutely reflected in the writing and in the story as a whole. I also wanted to shout out Teyana Taylor. Now, my introduction to Teyana Taylor was on MTV's My Super Sweet 16. Oh my gosh, that show, some of you have no idea what that is, but I think a lot of you know what a mess that show was. You know, it was cool to see like these big, you know, extravagant parties, but then the personalities, ugh, like it was the worst. When it came down to Teyana Taylor's episode, it was so different because, you know, she was from Harlem. She was tomboyish. You know, she knew all these people in the music industry. She wanted to break into that industry. You know, she wanted a bike. She didn't want a car. Like, just her demeanor and her personality. And it's just like there were so many aspects about her and about that episode that was like, this is totally not the norm. Like, this is not what I'm used to. But I really appreciated that. And it's been really awesome seeing her evolve since then as a singer, as an actress, and as a dancer. If you are familiar with Teyana Taylor, then you would look at her portrayal of Inez and kind of think, well, she's from Harlem, so, you know, she understands this. You know, this is her, you know, so you could argue that, okay, maybe she's just playing herself. And granted, the inspiration is there. You know, if you're from that place, then it definitely fuels your performance. It definitely adds to what you're bringing across on the screen. But there was a lot of depth here. And there were some places she really had to like reach down into and like pull out and display on screen. And I imagine that was not easy, but she went a lot deeper than I ever would have expected her to. I loved seeing her breathe life into this character with all of her nuances and her complications. I really loved it. I also want to shout out Will Catlett. Now, I had my introduction to him in the series Love Is that ended way too soon. I am still upset about it, but I was thankful for the introduction because he really is a quality actor. And I thought that he was the perfect complement to Teyana Taylor as Inez and Lucky, as far as their relationship and the dynamics of everything that they end up going through. But I thought that with all of Inez's, you know, passion and intensity, I thought he had this quiet resilience and strength that just was the perfect complement to that. It really brought that piece of the story together. And lastly, the three actors who portray Terry in all three phases of his life: Josiah Cross, Aven Courtney, and Aaron Kingsley Adetola. I really appreciated the dynamic that all three of them brought to the film. And of course, I think if you watch it, it'll certainly bring to mind Moonlight, even though it's a little bit different. It's not quite so drastic as far as the time frame. But it was really something to see the progression of Terry throughout the years, along with New York City, and just seeing this family just, fight to survive and fight to rebuild and fight to grow and fight to move forward despite the changes that are happening. I just think it really was an impactful and very timely narrative. What I loved is that this film does deal, with the struggle, with the hustle, but I was so relieved and surprised to just see just a different side of that. Like, it didn't feel like this was some pile up of misery, or it was just this kind of stereotypical, oh, and now this is going to happen with the child, and then this is going to happen with the dad, and like, it wasn't that at all. And I give my hats off to A.V. Rockwell for not only writing and crafting a story that was authentic, but also felt like it was taking a different approach to how we see struggle and, our lives as they become complicated. And it was, I'm telling you, it was such a breath of fresh air, and I was very grateful for that. So I'm going to jump over to the cons. Now, I don't really have that much to say here. I don't. One thing I'll say is that due to the time jumps and the framing of the story, we don't always get as much detail and as much insight into the journey, especially of the three Terrys as we move along. I think particularly with the middle Terry, I think that I felt like that went by fairly quickly. And I understood that the more significant part of the story is with, the oldest Terry that we see towards the, latter half of the film. But I kind of felt like between really young Terry and, much older Terry or oldest Terry, it was kind of like, felt like we kind of breezed by that a little bit. And I would have liked to have seen more from that character in that particular phase of life, especially when it comes to adolescence and kind of the young adult phase. I thought that was, I thought it was really nice to see. So it would have been nice to have just stayed there for just a little bit longer. I also think that because so much of the narrative is centered around Inez, Terry, and Lucky, we don't get to learn as much about these side characters and the people in their community. They're obviously important people and they push them forward in a lot of important ways, but I felt like they never really felt as present or as part of the story as they could have. And I would have really liked to have seen more of them factoring into the main story. So I'm going to give 1001 a B+. I thought that this was such a moving, heartfelt, and emotionally rich and culturally rich film. As far as the depiction of New York, the changes over the years, and even some of the things that are pointed to historically that took place in that city, I really appreciated being able to just go back and experience that and seeing what that journey would have looked like for someone who lived there and saw their world and their community suddenly changing and really disappearing overnight. I love that A.V. Rockwell was able to pour out so much of her love and passion and frustration and conflict and so much more into this story. Because for me, that is when writing is at its best, and that's when it's the most distinctive, when it comes from a real place, when it comes from an honest place and a raw place, when it's not just, hey, I had a great experience growing up, but no, like where there are layers to it, where it's like, I love this, but I hate this. I appreciated this, but it's hard for me to look back at this. And that's our experience sometimes in life. And what I also appreciate is that this is a story for everyone. Yes, it is speaking to New Yorkers, it is speaking to the Black community, in a sense, it is speaking to single mothers and people who are trying to just rebuild their lives, but it goes beyond that. It really can speak to anyone, and that's what I also love, is that it's a universal story, you know? It's a story of love, heartbreak, loss, growth, progression, and so much more. 1001 will be premiering in theaters March 31st. You guys are free to check it out, leave your thoughts below, and let me know what you think. So, once again, this is D, Movie Man, signing off, and I'll see you at the movies.